Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
The Honorable John Bel Edwards, Governor of the great state of Louisiana, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome to the show the Honorable John Bel Edwards, Governor of the state of Louisiana. Governor, welcome.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here with you.
Thank you for being here. You've been governor now about 16 months, I think?
15 months, yeah.
Going on 16 months. What has surprised you, Governor? What's disappointed you? What have you found that you didn't expect?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud to be the governor of the great state of Louisiana, and I wake up every day really excited about the opportunity to continue to serve. I still remain very optimistic, but the most surprising thing was just the sheer number of challenges of different types. You know, we have the budget problems, the structural budget deficit, and that's one of the most disappointing things, but the size of it was surprising. Every candidate running for governor knew we had a problem. We all thought it was in the $600 to $700 million range. It turned out to be $2 billion. So the fiscal constraints, both a surprise and certainly a disappointment. 57 out of our 64 parishes were declared major federal disasters in the first year.
Like they're piling on, right?
Yeah. In the first year, 85% of our state's population lives in one of those 57 parishes. That's very challenging. We had the shootings sandwiched in between the two floods in March and August. In July, we had the shootings of Alton Sterling, followed by unrest, and then the fellow from St. Louis came down and shot 6 of our police officers, killing 3. So tremendous challenges, but through those challenges, we've seen the people of Louisiana at their very best. And I'm just so incredibly proud of our state. Despite all of these challenges, the way that we come together and treat one another as neighbor, whether it's a man-made disaster or a natural disaster. And certainly we're looking to replicate that and come together, find compromise, and solve this budgetary problem that we have as well.
You know, what's always been interesting to me as I followed you from the Louisiana legislature and then your rise to governor in that election, which was a fascinating campaign, by the way, is that you always use the word service when you speak of your job. And I don't know if that's attributable to your wonderful military career and what you did there, but I've always been very, very happy to see that. I mean, I think that that's a wonderful thing, Governor. Where does that come from?
Tim, I get that from my mother. My mother talks about people being in service, and now she's primarily talking about people being in the armed forces. But she talks about people who are police officers being in service. And so I believe being an elected official is to be a public servant. And if you're a public servant, and in fact try to be a servant leader that comes from the Bible, but being in service, that is a term that my mother used and continues to use. And so I believe that we are called to service.
One last question before we turn our focus to the issues that are you and the legislature are dealing with. Is this, you know, I sort of grew up in the legislature, and you and I talked a little bit about the fact that I worked for the legislature when I was out of college, 25 years ago. And back then, it was a much less partisan place. Seemed like that there was more agreement on things, that we could get things done. And it seems to me, and you've mentioned it, and I've heard Republicans mention it, that more and more and more Washington-style politics are invading our state and have invaded our state. I know you have to deal with it. I know you have to work with it. But behind the scenes, it must be a little frustrating to you.
Well, it is, and I will tell you, in my honest assessment, we are not Washington, D.C., but we're moving in that direction. We're certainly more like Washington today than we were when I came to Baton Rouge 10 years ago as a young freshman member of the House of Representatives. And it is disappointing because at the end of the day, I don't think we serve the people of Louisiana better when we go from a purely partisan perspective. And even when you were working at the legislature, there were very few Republicans, but you had extremely conservative Democrats, liberal Democrats, so you had different philosophies. But at the end of the day, people could come together, compromise, and find common ground. It's just so much harder to do today, and that's unfortunate. And I have to continually reassess and make sure that I'm not contributing to that, or if I find that I am, that I dial it back and really expand my outreach and bring people in. I meet with leaders and rank and file members of the legislature, regardless of party, all the time. And I try to be very, very accessible because I think that's one of the ways to combat against this hyper-partisanship.
Now, it is no secret that you inherited a fiscal mess, right? I think it's been 15 mid-year budget deficits in the last 9 years, something of that nature. So there's a lot of discussion out there, right? About, does Louisiana have a spending problem? Do we have a revenue problem? Do we have a dedication problem? Do we have a structural budget problem? Or is it a combination of all of those? What did you find, Governor?
Well, first of all, it is a combination of all of them. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the surprising things about becoming governor and seeing just how big the structural budget deficit was, I mean, $2 billion, that's more than 20% of the state general fund. And that number— $2 billion
out of 9,
$2 billion,
right?
Correct. Right. And so it's a really big number. It's hard to accommodate that. And it's for several reasons. We do need structural budget reform, structural tax reform. We've got to make sure that the budget reform includes all of the credits and rebates and incentives that are costing us more in tax expenditures than we're realizing in a return on investment. It's all of these things combined, which is why we need a really holistic effort. And we had the task force that met over the previous year that produced a report to the legislature. Most of the things that I'm asking the legislature to do in this session come directly from that report. Even with that, there's an awful lot of resistance in the legislature.
So for that long-term structural reform, right, and some of the things you've tried to do, I know that one of the things you've said often is, if you don't agree with my plan, come up with one of your own.
Yes.
How do we get to some sort of agreement there, Governor? I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball a little bit. I know it's been difficult, but what are your thoughts there?
Well, it's difficult. I'll take the current session, for example. When I ask leadership, particularly in the House of Representatives, and I'm not picking on the House, but as you know, the budget starts there, and any revenue measure also starts there. And when you fix these problems, that's where you have to look. I asked the leadership there, what is your plan? Let's overlay your plan in mine, see where there's overlap, and let's agree to those things, and let's figure out how to bridge the difference where we're not in agreement. There is no plan to lay down. They haven't shown up with anything yet. We're in the third week of the session, and it's only a 2-month session. So I hope we can get there. It's important that we do it, but we're going to keep working.
We're going to take a break. We come back. I want to talk about the budget. I want to talk about taxation in our state. I want to talk about a lot of the things that some of your critics point to in terms of our business climate. We're visiting with the Honorable John Bell Edwards. He's the governor of the state of Louisiana, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together. Good times or bad, and oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors, they're my customers, they're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value. What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools, and that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Governor John Bell Edwards is our guest. Governor, let's talk about budget structure. I have never, as a Republican in this state, gotten the thought that you are some big tax and spend liberal. But the truth of the matter is, both of the budgets you've presented to the legislature have been bigger than the year before. According to a LBIS analysis, our state government has grown about 44% or more over the last 10 years, while our private economy has grown about 25%. Are we doing enough to live within our means here?
Well, first of all, we've also proposed and initiated over $500 million in cuts.
Right.
We've also saved a lot of money, $200 million this year alone on Medicaid expansion that we saved, which otherwise would have had to been cut or revenue. And when you say we're growing faster than the economy, and you're talking about 44% versus 25%, I'm not sure where LBIS is getting their numbers from. I don't know if they're accounting only for state general fund, which is what we should control because that's our effort, or whether they're talking about federal dollars as well. I will make no apology for trying to avail ourselves of our federal tax dollars, bringing them back to Louisiana, whether it's for the Medicaid expansion, as I talked about, or whether it's for help with transportation issues. So I'm not sure where they come from, but I will tell you this. I inherited a budget that had $800 million of one-time money. So on his way out, Governor Jindal didn't even try to marry up those expenditures, those recurring expenditures, with recurring revenue. There was nothing in the budget. For example, there was 11 payments to the Medicaid vendor payment, leaving me to make 13 in my first year. There was no increase in utilization for the Medicaid program, which we've had increase in utilization ever since the mid-1960s when we've had Medicaid. So we've had a tremendous amount of work to do. I am very proud of the budgets that we're submitting because for the first time in a decade, they are honest budgets. Jay Darden is doing a great job as the commissioner.
Our mutual friend. Right?
He is, and he's doing a great job as commissioner of administration. And at least we can have honest discussion and perhaps disagreement about the budget because we at least know what we're looking at now. But this is very difficult, you know, and it's a little bit interesting that it's a LBIS analysis because the executive director of LBIS is somebody who helped Bobby Jindal with those budgets for a number of years, whether as executive counsel or as chief of staff. And I like Stephen. I'd like for him to come work with me and have more conversations with me. But I think it's sort of interesting that he's pointing out these problems when he was part of the team that created them.
Well, another thing that critics point to is this idea that you have said that Louisiana businesses aren't paying their fair share. I think you're focused mostly on corporate income tax when we talk about that, but there are some studies out there that say Louisiana businesses as a whole, state and local governments, pay a higher percentage of taxes in Louisiana than they do in a lot of other states. What are you looking at there, Governor? What is your biggest concern?
First of all, I would be interested to know whether that study accounts for the inventory tax credit, where we're paying a lot of those businesses back the taxes they're paying the local government, or the other incentives, the rebates and the credits that we're paying out to them as well. The fact of the matter is 80% of our corporations pay zero income tax in the state of Louisiana, 80%. Now think about that. In the revenue mix for the state as a whole, 39% comes from individual income tax, 39% comes from the sales tax, 3% comes from corporate franchise tax and corporate income tax combined. There is no way that represents fairness. There is not the proper balance in that system, and the corporate activity tax, which we are proposing and is being taken up as we speak in the Ways and Means Committee with some amendments that will be offered today, looking only to have those corporations that are not paying income tax to start paying basically through an alternative minimum tax, so that we can promote fairness and have individuals stop carrying too much of the weight. And so I think it's important to do that. It is part of the way that we're going to fix the structural budget deficit, but it's also a big part of restoring fairness to our system.
When you mention 80% of the corporations aren't paying any income tax in the state, does that account for thousands of businesses that are structured in a way that those taxes are flowing through to the individuals?
I'm not talking about flow-through entities there. We have 101,000 entities that are taxed as corporations, either LLCs that choose to be taxed as corporations or C Corps. I'm not talking about partnerships, other LLCs, or S Corps. And only 20,000 out of 101,000 are paying any income tax. And when you see the amendments that are being offered today in the Ways and Means Committee, all of the commercial activity tax as it relates to the pass-through entities, that's going to go away. We're talking about strictly those corporations that are not paying income tax, that we would like to have to pay some alternative minimum tax, which would be 0.35% of their gross receipts.
You mentioned the debate that's going on as we sit here and tape on Tuesday morning. That is, the legislature's in its second day of debating the corporate activity tax, which is one of the centerpieces of your fiscal policy for this year. We got about a minute left in this segment, so we'll carry it over. But tell us your thoughts around that, Governor. You explained it a little bit, but that's a tax that's only, I think, in place in 5 or 6 other states, and a couple of them are looking at repealing it. Is that the right way to go?
Well, possibly. Well, first of all, you got to understand that this is not the primary tax. This is basically going to be an alternative minimum tax. How else do you get these entities to start paying tax? The other thing is you're creating something that is not an income tax, and so the tax credits and rebates, which are overly generous in Louisiana, won't apply to this. And so that's one of the reasons that we're doing it. And we're looking at other states like, for example, Ohio, that has this type of approach. We think it makes sense in Louisiana.
Yeah, and you know, that Ohio example has been used. I know that was part of a larger reform package, and that's really what I want to talk to you about when we come back from this break. We're very pleased to have as our guest the Honorable John Bell Edwards, Governor of the state of Louisiana. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Governor John Bel Edwards is our guest. Governor, we mentioned in the last segment that as we sit here and tape on Tuesday morning, they are debating the second day of the corporate activity tax. You know, I know there are a lot of amendments flying around, so we really don't know what's going to happen. I've read reports where the committee has said there's no way this thing's getting out of here. Who knows what's going to happen there? What's your vision for long-term structural reform in Louisiana? I know this is part of it, but can we scrap the whole thing and start over? Is that a possibility?
Well, certainly that's possible. That's not the task that's before us. The task before us right now is to craft a budget for next fiscal year and address the fiscal cliff that's coming July 1st, 2018.
$1.3 billion?
$1.3 billion. We do that, in my estimation, by looking at what the task force reported, both as it relates to the budget and taxation. For example, on the budget, we really need to curb our expenditures, our tax expenditures on credits and rebates and incentives that are not working and they're more costly than we can afford. We need to do as I've suggested, which is incorporate only 98% of the revenue that's estimated into a budget once we get to a point where the revenue is sufficient. And that's about $200 million that we can hold out in response to disasters, or if we have a revenue shortfall. That's correct. Right. But the tax reform measures ought to come from the task force as well. We talked about the commercial activity tax, but our program overall comes directly from that task force report where we talk about broadening the base and lowering the rates. I want to give over 90% of individual income taxpayers a tax cut. We can do that by reducing the rates and broadening the base. We can also reduce rates and have fewer rates on the corporate income tax side, but you have to broaden the base on both the individual income tax and the corporate income tax, and you do that by eliminating the deductibility of your federal tax liability, which, by the way, we're one of only 3 states that do that, but we would actually have lower rates, more competitive across the country. We ought to lower the sales tax rate. You know, we're an outlier in that area. Yes. We're the highest in the country when you combine the state and local sales tax. We ought to let that 5th penny roll off on June 30th, 2018 as scheduled. But in exchange for that, we can also broaden the base because there are more services that are taxed in many states. For example, Texas, we can have the sales tax apply to services which are growing faster than the retail sector. And in fact, you've seen where retail establishments are closing at record rates all across the country. So that's something that's very important that we should do too. So look at the plan as a whole. The corporate activity tax generally receives the most attention, but it is one part of the overall approach.
This whole idea of creating something that's more comprehensive, if you think across all of these taxing entities, sales tax, income tax, whatever the tax may be, property tax, lower rates, more stable base, to create stability, because that's really what business leaders are looking for. And you know, you talked about critics, and it's always easy to be a critic, but one of the things they point to is this instability of where we are. ExxonMobil just announced this $10 billion project is going to Texas instead of Louisiana. Now, the truth of the matter is, let's be honest, you've had some really good economic development wins working with Don Pearson and the team. What do you say to the business community about creating that stability that they're looking for?
Yeah, well, first of all, we see businesses that are choosing to expand their operations or to have new operations and put their headquarters in states that have a higher combined state and local tax burden than we do in Louisiana. But their long-range business plan knows what that tax burden is going to be on them, and they can plan for it. It's lower here in Louisiana, but it's unpredictable. You cited the number of mid-year shortfalls that we had just over the last 9 years, I think 15. In 9 years. Government also needs stability and predictability, because if we're ever going to get to the point where we can reliably invest in our critical priorities like higher education, like transportation infrastructure, you have to have a stable revenue base and a long-range plan that is much like what a business wants, stability and predictability. We don't have that in Louisiana. And so we have to stabilize. All of this budget reform talk, all this tax reform talk is about stabilizing our budget, because we want to be stable and predictable. And when we are, businesses will be stable and predictable, and they can have the confidence that they need to come to Louisiana. By the way, we had $21 billion worth of economic investment in Louisiana in my first year. We had corporate headquarters relocated from Houston to Louisiana. That's something that hasn't happened in a long time. So I don't want people to look at this one incident with Exxon. By the way, Exxon remains a very vibrant partner with Louisiana here in Louisiana. It creates and retains an awful lot of jobs here in Louisiana as it is, and we're very proud to have them, and we're working with them. But we shouldn't focus on one decision. We should look at everything as a whole.
Got to do this quickly because we only got about a minute and a half left. Infrastructure, critical to business in our state. I know you're pushing hard to do things differently. Give us 30 seconds on what you think might happen in this legislative session.
Well, we need to move forward with critical infrastructure investment. You cannot invest what you do not have. Our 16 cents worth of gas tax is worth 7.5 cents compared to what it was worth 30 years ago when it was put on the books. We are taking $40 million from the general fund to supplement our transportation task force money. Otherwise, we're going to leave our federal taxes on the table in Washington. That gets worse as we go forward, and we're not even talking about the president's $1 trillion 10-year infrastructure initiative, where we're going to have a non-federal match that's going to be higher than the Transportation Trust Fund match. We have to do this, otherwise our quality of life, the ability to attract investment, development, and jobs is going to be very much diminished.
Listen, you got a tough job, Governor.
Yes,
I don't envy the work that you're doing, although I appreciate the approach that you take to it, and your willingness to debate openly and honestly. Keep that going. It doesn't mean we'll always agree, but I think there's certainly a level of respect there from the business community as we go forward, so keep the good work up.
Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Hey guys, be sure to check out our new LBIS website, www.louisianabusinessandindustryshow.com.